I didn't expect quitting my corporate job to feel like a breakup. But the morning I walked out of that glass building with my sad little desk plant under my arm, I felt weirdly free and completely terrified at the same time. I'd been working in marketing for almost 3 years. Decent pay. Exhausting hours. My boss, Karen. Yes, that was actually her name. Used to say things like, "We're a family here," which is ironic because I haven't spoken to half my actual family since I came out. By the time I handed in my notice, I was burned out, bitter, and honestly kind of numb. I didn't have another job lined up. Just a little savings and a stubborn voice in my head saying, "You can't keep living like this, Jackson." So I quit. 2 weeks later, I was wearing a green apron and learning how to steam oat milk without screaming. The coffee shop was small, local, not a chain, tucked between a bookstore and a nail salon on a busy corner downtown. It smelled like espresso and cinnamon all the time, and somehow that alone felt healing. It wasn't glamorous. I made minimum wage plus tips. My hands constantly smelled like coffee grounds. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't dread going to work. That's where Carter comes in. He started coming in about a week after I did. The first time I noticed him, it was because he didn't look at his phone while waiting in line. That sounds stupid, I know, but everyone looks at their phone. It's like a reflex. He just stood there, hands in his coat pockets, looking around like he was actually present. He was tall, dark hair, kind of messy in a way that looked accidental but probably wasn't. Clean-shaven, sharp jaw, calm eyes. Not flashy hot, just steady. When he got to the counter, I gave him my standard customer service smile. "Hey, what can I get started for you?" He glanced at my name tag. "Large Americano," he said. Then a tiny pause. "Thanks, Jackson. Most people don't use your name." He did. I remember noticing his voice more than anything. Low but soft. Not the loud alpha energy I'd spent too much of my 20s chasing and getting hurt by. "Name for the order?" I asked automatically. He smiled slightly. "Carter." Of course it was. He left a normal tip that day. Nothing crazy. Just a couple bucks in the jar. I didn't think about it again. But he came back the next morning. And the next. Always around 8:15 a.m. Always the same drink. Large Americano. No room. And always that small, polite smile. He wasn't flirty. Not in an obvious way. He didn't stare too long or make weird comments like some guys do. If anything, he seemed reserved. After a week, I didn't need to ask for his order anymore. "Large Americano?" I'd say when he walked in. "And you didn't even ask," he'd reply, like he was impressed. We started adding tiny pieces of small talk. "Busy day?" "Yeah." "Meetings all morning?" "Fun?" "Never." He worked nearby, I learned. Some architecture firm a few blocks down. He wore button-downs most days. Sometimes a coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent. And then one Tuesday morning, something changed. It was a little busier than usual. I was juggling 3 drinks at once. When Carter stepped up, I gave him a quick nod. "Hey, Carter." "The usual?" "You read my mind." He tapped his card. I handed him the receipt to sign. Normally people scribble their name and move on. But when I went to grab the cup to call his order, I noticed something. Under the tip line, where there was usually just a dollar amount, he'd written, "You make mornings better." No smiley face. No number. Just that. For a second, I thought maybe I was reading into it. Maybe he meant the shop in general. Maybe he was just being polite. But the tip line was empty. He'd left $0. Instead of money, there was that note. I felt heat creep up my neck. I glanced up. He was waiting at the end of the counter like usual, hands in his coat pockets. Calm. Unbothered. Like he hadn't just short-circuited my entire nervous system. I made his Americano, set it down. "Carter." He picked it up. Our fingers brushed for half a second. "Have a good one, Jackson." And he left. I stood there for a solid 5 seconds before my coworker Mia leaned over. "You good?" she asked. "Yeah," I lied, folding the receipt and shoving it in my apron pocket. The thing is, I've been hit on before. Pretty aggressively sometimes. Especially when I worked in corporate. Drunk coworkers at happy hours. The next morning, he came back. Same time. Same calm expression. I tried to act normal. Large Americano? Please. He paid. Signed the receipt. I didn't look at it right away. I told myself not to care. But as soon as he stepped aside, I glanced down. Again, no tip. Instead, I like your smile. It's real. My stomach flipped. I looked up immediately this time. He was watching me. Not in a confident way. Not challenging. Just waiting. For my reaction. And for the first time, I didn't look away. I held his gaze. Just for a second. And I smiled. A real one. I told myself it was just a cute little thing. A bored office guy entertaining himself with poetic receipt notes. But the third morning, that's when it stopped feeling casual. He came in right on time. 8:14 this time, actually. I only know because I'd glanced at the clock twice already. Why was I checking? I don't know. Okay, I do know. Morning, I said, trying to sound neutral. Morning, Jackson. There it was again. My name. Like he liked saying it. The usual? I asked. Yeah. He paid. Signed. And this time, I didn't even pretend not to look. I flipped the receipt over the second he stepped aside. You seem happier here than you did in that suit. My brain completely stalled. How did he? I looked up so fast I nearly dropped the paper. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the pastry case like he hadn't just exposed a detail about my life I never told him. He'd seen me before. In my old life. The suit. The corporate version of me. That hit differently. Because he hadn't just noticed my smile. He'd noticed the change. I made his drink slower than usual. Not on purpose. My hands just weren't cooperating. When I set the cup down, I didn't call his name right away. He walked over anyway. You used to come into the building on 4th, he said quietly. Not a question. I swallowed. You noticed. I noticed things. That wasn't smug. It wasn't flirtatious. It was just factual. I worked 2 floors above your company, he added. You always looked exhausted. I let out a small laugh before I could stop myself. Accurate. And now? He asked. I shrugged, but I couldn't hide the softness in my voice. Now I smell like espresso and don't cry in bathroom stalls. That made him laugh. A real one this time. And something shifted. Because this wasn't just anonymous notes anymore. This was a conversation. He didn't leave right away that morning. He lingered near the pickup counter. Like he was deciding something. Why'd you quit? He asked. It wasn't invasive. Just curious. I thought about giving him the safe answer. Needed a change. But instead I surprised myself. I was miserable, I admitted. And I realized I kept telling myself I'd be happy. Once I got promoted. Or once I made more money. And then I looked up and 3 years were gone. He nodded slowly. That's brave, he said. I almost laughed again. Quitting without a backup plan isn't brave. It's borderline stupid. Maybe, he said. Or maybe it's the first honest decision you made in a while. God, why did that land so hard? Behind me, Mia called out another order. The shop was getting busier. Carter stepped back slightly. I'll see you tomorrow, he said. And for the first time it sounded less like routine and more like a promise. The notes kept coming. Every day. Never money. Always words. You focus when you make drinks. It's kind of intense. You tuck your hair behind your ear when you're stressed. You hum under your breath when the playlist switches. That one made me freeze. Because I didn't even realize I did that. It wasn't surface-level compliments anymore. It was observation. Tension. And the thing is, he never crossed a line. No numbers. No pressure. No you're hot or we should hang out. Just quiet noticing. Which somehow made it worse. Because now I was noticing him too. The way he always loosened his tie as soon as he stepped inside. The faint crease between his eyebrows when he was thinking. The way he'd pause half a second before speaking, like he weighed his words carefully. I started looking forward to 8:15 like it was the highlight of my shift. Which was dangerous. Because I've done this before. Built something in my head that wasn't real. Fallen for potential. One Friday morning, I decided to test something. When he handed back the receipt, I didn't look down. Instead, I grabbed a pen from behind the counter. On the side of his cup, under his name, I wrote, "You still owe me $2 in actual tips." Then I slid it toward him. He looked at it, then up at me. One eyebrow lifted slightly. "I thought we had an understanding," he said. "Oh, we do," I replied. "You get words," he said calmly. "Everyone else gets money." That sent a stupid, embarrassing rush through my chest. "Bold of you to assume I value words over money," I shot back. He leaned in slightly, not enough to be inappropriate, just enough that I could smell his cologne. Something clean, subtle. "You do." His eyes held mine, and for a split second, the entire coffee shop disappeared. Mia loudly dropped a metal pitcher in the sink behind me, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Carter stepped back, like the moment hadn't just happened. "I'll see you Monday, Jackson." "Wait, Monday?" I asked. He glanced at his watch. "Client meetings all weekend. Won't be in the area." It was such a small thing, but the idea of not seeing him for 2 days made my stomach dip in a way I didn't like. "Oh," I said, trying not to sound disappointed. "Have fun." He gave me that small, controlled smile. "I won't." And then he left. That weekend dragged, which was ridiculous. I didn't know him. Not really. We hadn't exchanged numbers, hadn't hung out, hadn't even talked for more than a few minutes at a time. But those notes were sitting folded in my apartment drawer. Yeah, I kept them. Don't judge me. Sunday night, I found myself thinking about something. He'd been the one leaving words, initiating, watching, noticing. What would happen if I stopped waiting? Monday morning came, 8:13. My hands were already sweating. 8:14. The door opened, and Carter walked in. But he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him, and her hand was resting casually on his arm. And I swear to God, my heart actually dropped into my stomach. It's insane how fast your brain can spiral. In the 2 seconds it took them to walk from the door to the counter, I had already constructed an entire backstory. Girlfriend, long-term, probably lives with her, probably laughs at his dumb jokes in bed, probably gets the real words, not the receipt scraps. I forced my face into neutral mode. Customer service Jackson activated. Mia shot me a look like, "You good?" Because apparently my entire soul had left my body. Carter stepped up to the counter. The woman stayed tucked into his side, her hand still lightly resting on his forearm. She was pretty. Dark blonde hair, sleek coat, confident posture. The kind of woman who absolutely does not smell like espresso for a living. "Morning," he said, like nothing was different. "Morning," I replied. My voice didn't crack. "Small victories." "The usual?" I asked because routine felt safer than thinking. He hesitated. "For me, yeah." And he glanced at her. "Vanilla latte," she said with a quick smile. "Oat milk." "Got it." I rang them up. My hands were steady, which honestly impressed me. When I handed him the receipt to sign, I didn't look at him. Didn't want to. Didn't want to see if he looked guilty. Or normal. Or happy. He signed it. Passed it back. And this time I didn't check it immediately. I made their drinks. Called them out. "Carter." He stepped forward. When our fingers brushed, it felt different. Because now I knew there were other hands that got to hold him without pretending it was accidental. "Thanks," he said quietly. She smiled at me. "You guys always this fast in the mornings?" "Impressive." I nodded politely. "Try our best." They stepped aside, talking softly to each other. And here's the stupid part. He wasn't acting romantic. There was no kissing, no whispered inside jokes. They stood close, but not intimate. Still, it didn't matter. The damage was done. After they left, I finally unfolded the receipt. There was no tip, just the note. "Don't jump to conclusions." I stared at it. My pulse thudded in my ears. He knew. He'd seen it on my face. Of course he had. He notices things. I felt exposed, embarrassed, like I'd been caught caring too much about something that was never mine. The rest of my shift dragged. 8:15 came and went, and I hated that I'd been waiting for it in the first place. The next day he came alone. And I had decided something. No more soft smiles. No more subtle flirting. If he had a girlfriend or whatever that was, I wasn't going to be the idiot barista collecting poetic breadcrumbs. Morning, he said. Hi. No nickname tone. No warmth. Just neutral. He noticed immediately. The usual? I asked flatly. He studied me for half a second. Yeah. I rang him up. He signed. I didn't look. Didn't care. Except I did. God, I did. When I handed him his drink, he didn't move away right away. Can we talk? He asked. My heart tried to betray me again. We are talking, I said. You know that's not what I mean. Behind me, the espresso machine hissed aggressively, like it was eavesdropping. I swallowed. I'm working. He nodded once. After your shift. It wasn't a question. It also wasn't pushy. Just steady. I get off at 3. I heard myself say before my brain approved it. I'll be here, he replied. And then he left. 3:02 p.m. I walked out of the shop still in my apron because I was too impatient to take it off inside. He was sitting at one of the outside tables. No coffee. No phone. Just waiting. When he saw me, he stood, which did something very annoying to my chest. You look mad, he said calmly. I'm not mad. You're mad. I crossed my arms. You brought your girlfriend into my workplace. He blinked once. Then the smallest exhale. She's not my girlfriend. I didn't respond. She's my sister. I felt the blood drain from my face. My sister, he repeated. She's visiting from Chicago. I promised I'd show her my usual coffee place. My usual coffee place. I hated how much that phrase softened me. She's straight, he added, like it was relevant. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for 24 hours. You could have said that yesterday, I muttered. You could have asked, he replied gently. Touché. We stood there in a weird, charged silence. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled something out, folded receipts. A small stack. My stomach flipped. You're not the only one who keeps things, he said. He handed them to me. I unfolded the top one. It was one of the cups. From weeks ago. The side where I'd written, You still owe me $2. You kept that? I asked. I keep all of them, he said. The cups. The notes. Everything. My throat went dry. Why? I whispered. He looked at me the same way he had the first day he wrote something instead of tipping. Intentional. Measured. Honest. Because I don't leave notes instead of tips for everyone, Jackson. And for the first time since quitting my old life, since putting on that stupid green apron, since trying to convince myself I wasn't drifting, I felt something solid under my feet. But I wasn't sure, he continued quietly, if you were just being nice, or if I was imagining it. You weren't, I said. The words came out before fear could stop them. I wasn't imagining it either. His jaw tightened slightly, like he was holding something back. So here's me, he said, not writing it on a receipt. Would you like to have coffee with me? He asked. When you're not the one making it? And I swear to God, it was the simplest question, but it felt like stepping off a cliff in the best possible way. I smiled. The real one. Yeah, I said. I would. I thought saying yes would make me feel relieved. Instead, I felt exposed. Because now it wasn't playful. It wasn't safe behind a counter and a receipt and a paper cup. Now it was real. When? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Tonight. Bold. I liked it. I close at 6, I said. I'll come back at 6, he replied. There was no dramatic pause. No awkward lingering. He just nodded once, like we'd agreed on something important, and walked away. The last 3 hours of my shift were torture. Every time the door opened, my heart jumped even though I knew he wouldn't be back until 6. Mia kept giving me side eyes because apparently I was smiling at nothing. You get promoted or something? She finally asked. No, I said, trying not to grin like an idiot. Demoted. To a date. Her jaw dropped. With who? Regular. The hot, quiet one? I choked. You noticed. Jackson. Everyone noticed. Cool. Cool, cool, cool. At 5:58, I ripped off my apron and stuffed it in my locker. My hair smelled like coffee, but there wasn't time to shower. I ran to the bathroom, tried to fix it with my hands, decided it was hopeless, and just leaned into the barista chic thing. When I walked out at exactly 6, he was there. Of course he was. Leaning against the brick wall outside the shop, sleeves rolled up, no tie this time, just a navy sweater and dark jeans. He looked relaxed, like this wasn't terrifying for him at all. "You ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." He gestured down the sidewalk. "There's a place 2 blocks over. Not corporate. You'll approve." I snorted. "You think you know me already?" "I pay attention," he said. "So," I said, because silence suddenly felt heavier without an espresso machine between us. "Do you normally hit on baristas?" "No." That sounded very convincing. He smiled slightly. "I don't normally hit on anyone." I glanced at him. Really? Really? Something about the way he said it made me believe him. We reached the cafe. Small, dimly lit, soft jazz playing inside. The kind of place that charges too much for pour-overs but makes you feel like you're in a movie. He held the door open for me. I noticed. We ordered, ironically, I got tea. He got a cappuccino. "Traitor," I told him. "I contain multitudes," he replied. We sat across from each other at a small wooden table. "So," he said, resting his forearms on the table, "how's it feel being on this side?" "Exposed," I admitted. He nodded. "Good. Good. Yes. Means it matters." That did something to me, because he wasn't treating this like a casual fling. He wasn't leaning in with cheap lines. He was steady, intentional, like he'd thought about this. "You could have just asked me out weeks ago," I said. "I could have," he agreed. "Why didn't you?" He looked down at his cup for a moment. "Because when I first noticed you, you looked fragile." I stiffened slightly. "Not weak," he clarified quickly. "Just like you were rebuilding something." That hit closer to the bone than I expected. "And I didn't want to be another thing that complicated that," he finished. The honesty in his voice made my throat tighten. "So the notes?" I asked. "Low risk," he said. "If you ignored them, I'd look mildly eccentric and move on. And if I didn't?" He met my eyes. "Then maybe you were noticing me too." Silence stretched between us. Not awkward, just charged. "I was," I said quietly. His jaw tightened again in that subtle way I was starting to recognize. "Yeah," he said softly. "I know." That warmth spread through my chest again. The same feeling I'd had the day he said I looked happier. We talked for hours. About work. About why he chose architecture. I like building things that outlast me. About why I chose marketing originally. I thought it would make me feel impressive. He asked real questions. Listened to the answers. At one point, he reached across the table to brush a crumb off my sleeve. It was small, but his fingers lingered just a second too long. Neither of us commented on it. By the time we stepped back outside, the sky was dark. "You walking?" he asked. "Yeah, it's only 10 minutes. I'll walk you." It wasn't possessive, just natural. Halfway to my apartment, our hands brushed. Once, twice, and then he just took mine, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I froze for half a heartbeat. Then I laced my fingers with his. His hand was warm, steady, confident, and the stupidest, happiest laugh bubbled out of me. "What?" he asked. "Nothing," I said. "This is just not how I pictured my life going when I quit my job." He squeezed my hand slightly. "Good." We stopped outside my building. "You don't have to write it on a receipt," I said softly. He stepped closer. "I wasn't planning to." "Still want actual tips?" he murmured. I smiled. "Depends what you're offering." And then he kissed me. Not rushed, not desperate, just sure, like he'd been thinking about it for weeks. And honestly, so had I. When he pulled back, his forehead rested lightly against mine. "I'm really glad you quit that job," he said quietly. "Me too," I breathed. Because for the first time, quitting didn't feel like falling apart. It felt like stepping into something I didn't know I deserved. And the next morning, he still came in at 8:15. But this time, he left both a note and a tip. The weird thing about finally kissing someone you've been building up in your head? The next morning is terrifying. Because now there's something to lose. I barely slept. Not because it was bad, God, no. It was the opposite. My brain just wouldn't shut up. At 7:50 a.m., I was already at the espresso machine pretending not to stare at the door. Mia clocked it immediately. "You look disgusting," she said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "In love," she clarified. "You look disgusting in love." I tried to keep my face neutral. Failed. The bell above the door chimed. 8:14. He was early again. Carter walked in like he hadn't just kissed me senseless 12 hours ago. Except his eyes changed the second they found mine. Subtle, but there. "Morning," he said. "Morning." My voice came out softer than usual. He stepped up to the counter like always. Same rhythm. Same space between us. "The usual?" I asked. He leaned forward slightly. "Depends," he said quietly. "Are we pretending we didn't make out outside your building?" Heat shot up my neck. Mia, 2 feet away, suddenly found the pastry case extremely interesting. "We're at my place of employment," I muttered. "Right," he said, nodding seriously. "Professional." He tapped his card. Signed the receipt. When he handed it back, our fingers brushed deliberately this time. Not accidental. Not shy. Intentional. I didn't look at the receipt right away. I made his Americano. Set it down. "Carter." He picked it up but didn't leave. Instead, he rested one hand lightly on the counter. "So," he said casual. "Are we doing this?" "Doing what?" "This," he repeated. "You, me." Coffee shop slow burn into something real. My stomach flipped. "You're very confident," I said. "I don't like wasting time." That wasn't arrogant. It was honest. I swallowed. "Yeah," I said quietly. "We're doing this." A small, controlled smile. Then he left like he hadn't just rearranged my entire emotional landscape before 8:30 a.m. The second the door closed, I grabbed the receipt. This time there was a tip. $5. And underneath it, "I prefer kissing you to writing about kissing you." I actually had to grip the counter. Mia leaned over. "Okay. I need details immediately." The next few weeks felt surreal. He still came every morning. Still left notes. But now they were different. Less cautious. More direct. "Dinner Thursday? You look tired today. Come over after your shift. I like the way you laugh when you forget to be guarded." We started seeing each other outside the shop regularly. Dinner at his place, minimalist apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows, 2 clean countertops. Movie nights at mine. Second-hand couch, mismatched mugs, him stealing my blanket. He was different outside the cafe. Warmer. Less measured. One night, lying on his couch, my head on his chest, I asked something I probably should have asked earlier. "Why me?" He didn't answer right away. His fingers traced lazy circles on my arm. "Because you chose something hard," he said eventually. "That's your reason?" "Yes." I lifted my head to look at him. "You quit a version of your life that looked impressive," he continued. "Most people don't. They stay. Even when they're miserable." I let out a quiet breath. "You saw that from 2 floors up?" "I saw you look like you were suffocating," he said softly. "And then I saw you walk into that coffee shop like you could breathe again." God, he noticed everything. "And I wanted to know the guy who chose breathing," he finished. I didn't have a clever response, so I kissed him instead. But here's the thing about starting something real right after you blow up your old life. You're still rebuilding. And rebuilding is messy. One afternoon, about a month in, the shop was slammed. Line out the door. I was short-staffed. Someone yelled because their almond milk foam wasn't thick enough. I felt that old, creeping panic in my chest. The voice that used to whisper, "You're behind. You're failing. You're not enough." I hadn't felt it this strong since I quit. And then I saw him, standing at the back of the line, watching, not smiling, not waving, just there. By the time he reached the counter, my hands were shaking slightly. The usual? I asked, breath tight. He looked at me for a long second. You okay? Yeah. I lied automatically. He didn't call me on it. Just nodded, paid, stepped aside. I made his drink last. On purpose. Needed a second to breathe. When I handed it to him, he didn't leave. I'll wait outside, he said quietly. For what? I asked. For you to clock out. I blinked. That's 2 hours. I have time. And something in my chest cracked open. Because this wasn't about flirting. Or notes. Or cute cafe romance. This was him choosing to sit outside for 2 hours because he saw me unraveling. To 5:01 I walked out. He was still there. Same spot. You didn't have to, I said. I know. We didn't walk right away. You don't have to prove anything, he murmured. I'm not trying to. You are, he said gently. To yourself. That hit too close. I don't want to fail again, I admitted. You didn't fail before. I walked away. Exactly. He tilted my chin up slightly. You walked away from something that was killing you. That's not failure, Jackson. My throat tightened, because somewhere deep down, I'd been waiting for someone to say that. And mean it. He kissed my forehead. Not dramatic. Not urgent. Just steady. Like everything else about him. And for the first time since quitting, I didn't feel like I was drifting between versions of myself. I felt chosen. Not because I was impressive. Not because I was safe. But because I was honest enough to change. And Carter? He wasn't just leaving notes anymore. He was building something with me. Slowly. Intentionally. The way he builds everything. There's a moment in every new relationship where the high settles. The butterflies calm down. The "is this real?" feeling turns into routine. And routine can either kill something or deepen it. For us, it deepened. Carter still came in at 8:15 most mornings. But sometimes he'd text instead. Yeah. We were texting now. The first time his name popped up on my phone. Carter. I stared at it like it might disappear. Carter, meeting ran late. Save me an Americano? I smiled like an idiot at my screen. We didn't rush anything physically. That part surprised me the most. After that first kiss, there were plenty more. But they were slow. Intentional. Like everything else he did. He didn't grab. He didn't push. He waited. And I didn't realize how much I needed that until I had it. About 6 weeks in, he invited me to something that made my stomach flip for an entirely different reason. My firm's hosting a small gallery event, he said one night, lying next to me in my apartment. Some of our recent projects. Why? Pretentious lighting. The usual. Sounds thrilling, I muttered. He smirked. Come with me. I went quiet. Corporate events. Button-down shirts. People who ask what you do and then silently rank you based on your answer. He noticed immediately. You don't have to, he said. No, I cut in. I want to. Did I? I wasn't sure. But I didn't want to be the guy who shrank from rooms just because I used to belong in them. Okay, he said softly. The night of the event, I almost bailed. I stood in front of my closet for 20 minutes. I didn't own suits anymore. I donated half my old work clothes after I quit. It felt symbolic at the time. Now I kind of regretted it. I settled on dark jeans and a clean black button-down. Simple. Not trying too hard. When Carter saw me outside his building, his expression shifted. You look good, he said. You look expensive, I replied, eyeing his tailored jacket. He stepped closer, adjusting my collar slightly. I'm serious, he said quietly. You look good. The way he said it grounded me. Inside, the space was sleek. White walls. Architectural models on display. Soft conversations floating through the air. I felt it immediately, that old version of me trying to wake up. The one who measured himself against everyone else in the room. Carter introduced me simply. This is Jackson. Not my friend. Not the guy I'm seeing. Just my name. And the way he said it, steady, sure, felt like enough. For the first hour I held my own. Made small talk. Asked questions. Smiled. But then I overheard two guys near the wine table. He left marketing? For a coffee shop. It wasn't malicious, just curious. But it hit anyway. I felt that familiar burn crawl up my neck. Before I could spiral, Carter's hand found the small of my back. Subtle. Grounding. "You good?" he murmured. "Yeah," I said automatically. He tilted his head slightly. "Jackson." That tone. The one that said he wasn't asking for the easy answer. I exhaled. "Sometimes I feel like I downgraded." The words tasted bitter. He didn't laugh. Didn't dismiss it. He turned fully toward me, blocking out the room. "You chose something that makes you happier," he said quietly. "That's not a downgrade. It doesn't look impressive." Who are you trying to impress? That question hit harder than anything else. Because I didn't have a good answer. He stepped closer, voice lower. "I'm not dating you because of your resume." I huffed a small laugh. "That's good. It's currently underwhelming." "I'm dating you," he continued, ignoring my deflection. "Because you're honest. Because you're rebuilding instead of pretending. Because you make terrible latte art but care too much about getting it right." I snorted despite myself. "And because," he added softer now, "you look lighter than you did in that suit." The noise of the room faded again. That steady presence. Every time I wobbled, he didn't grab me. He just steadied me. We left early. On purpose. Outside, the cool night air felt better than the polished gallery ever could. "I'm proud of you," he said as we walked. "For what?" "For coming tonight." I glanced at him. "You don't get to be proud of me for showing up." "Why not?" "Because I'm not your project." He stopped walking. Not angry, just serious. "You're not," he said firmly. "You're my partner." The word hung there. Partner. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. But it felt solid. "You're not someone I'm fixing," he continued. "You're someone I'm choosing." That did it. I closed the distance between us and kissed him right there on the sidewalk. No hesitation. No checking who was watching. When we pulled back, he smiled slightly. "You hum when you're overwhelmed," he said. "What?" "You were humming inside." I groaned. "I hate that you notice everything." He leaned in close, lips brushing near my ear. "I don't." And that was the thing. The notes on receipts had started as something playful. But somewhere along the way, they'd turned into something else. Not observation for the sake of flirting. Observation because he cared. Because he was paying attention. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to be the most impressive person in the room. I was just trying to be present. The way he had been that first morning in line. Hands in his pockets. Looking up. And noticing me. The next morning at 8:15, he came in like always. But this time, when he signed the receipt, the note read, "Still choosing you." And for once, I didn't need to question what it meant. You'd think the story would end there. Cute notes. Soft kisses. Steady, emotionally available architect boyfriend. Roll credits. But real life doesn't wrap up that neatly. 3 months in, things were good. Almost suspiciously good. We had rhythms now. Thursday nights at his place. Sunday mornings at mine. He still came in for coffee most weekdays, but sometimes he'd just text, "Skip the line. Come sit with me." And I would. Mia pretended to be annoyed, but she loved the drama of it. The notes never stopped. They just evolved. Sometimes they were simple. "Lunch tomorrow?" Sometimes they hit deeper. "You talk about the future like you're afraid to want things." That one stuck with me, because he wasn't wrong. Quitting my job had been step 1, but I still hadn't figured out step 2. Was I staying at the coffee shop forever? Was this temporary? Was I drifting again, just in a different direction? One night, lying in bed, I finally said it out loud. "I don't know what I'm doing." Carter propped himself up on one elbow. "With what?" "My life," I admitted. "I quit something that made sense. Now I'm just here." "You're not just here. I make coffee. You make people's mornings better. That's not a career plan." He studied me carefully. "Do you want it to be?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know," I said honestly. I just know I don't want to wake up dreading my life again. He nodded slowly. Then that's your starting point. I frowned. That's vague. I build things for a living, he said. You don't start with the roof. You start with the foundation. And what's my foundation? He didn't hesitate. Choosing what doesn't suffocate you. God, why did everything he said sound like it belonged in a book? I rolled onto my side, facing him fully. Are you scared? I asked. Of what? This? I gestured between us. Me not having it figured out. He smiled faintly. Jackson, I'm not dating you because you have a 5-year plan. Then why? Because you're honest about not having one. And because when you care about something, you care all the way. That settled somewhere deep in my chest. The real test came a week later. An old coworker reached out. We have an opening. The message read, better pay, better hours. You'd be perfect. My stomach twisted. Old me would have jumped at it. Security, status, path. I stared at the message for an hour before responding. I didn't tell Carter right away. Not because I was hiding it, but because I needed to figure out what I wanted before I let his steady voice influence me. The next morning, I was distracted at work. He noticed immediately. You're somewhere else, he said after I handed him his coffee. Am I? Yes. I sighed. Old job offered me something. His expression didn't change. Do you want it? I don't know. Does it excite you? No. Does it make you feel safe? Yes. He nodded once. Safety isn't bad. I know. But, he prompted gently, but I'm scared that if I go back, I'll slowly lose the version of me you met. That slipped out before I could filter it. His eyes softened. You think I'm dating a job title? No. Then what are you scared of? I exhaled slowly. Becoming that exhausted guy in a suit again. He stepped closer to the counter. Then don't. It's not that simple. It kind of is, he said calmly. If you go back differently. I frowned. What does that mean? It means you don't hand over your entire identity to something that pays you. That landed hard. Because that's exactly what I'd done before. You can have ambition, he continued. Just don't let it own you. The shop was quiet for once. Morning lull. He reached across the counter, fingers brushing mine. You're allowed to build something bigger than this cafe, he said softly. Just make sure it doesn't cost you yourself. I swallowed. Would you still come at 8:15 if I left? I asked. He smiled slightly. I came for you, not the espresso machine. That did it. Not because it answered my career dilemma, but because it reminded me. He wasn't attached to a version of me. He was attached to me. That night I declined the offer. Not dramatically. Just a simple, thank you, but I'm pursuing something different right now. And for the first time, that sentence didn't feel like a lie. Because different didn't have to mean undefined. It just meant intentional. A few days later, as I was closing up, Carter walked in at 5:59. You're cutting it close, I said. He handed me a folded piece of paper. Not a receipt. Actual paper. What's this? I asked. Open it. I unfolded it slowly. It wasn't a note. It was a sketch. A small cafe layout. Clean lines. Warm seating. Big windows. At the top, handwritten. Future. My heart slammed against my ribs. You said you didn't know what you were building, he said quietly. So I thought I'd show you what it could look like. I stared at the drawing. It wasn't fantasy-level unrealistic. It was thoughtful, practical, designed. You think I could do this? I whispered. I think you care enough to try. Silence stretched between us. Then I laughed, because of course. You started by not tipping me, I said. And now you're designing my hypothetical cafe? He shrugged slightly. I build things. I stepped around the counter, didn't care who was watching, and kissed him, harder than I ever had before. When I pulled back, I pressed the sketch to my chest. You're ridiculous, I said.